So we are on Canto 1, Chapter 8, prayers by Queen Kunti, and the text for today is text 8, Prabhuji. Prabhuji, I can hand over to you. I can hand over to you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Krishna Maji, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining here today. I'll start by some prayers and we can recite the verse. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Mudireye Nastapraya Vyabresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavatir Nishtaki. I can see Shashrin Prabhu is here. Shashrin Prabhu, would you like to recite the verse?
Yes, Prabhuji. Krishna. Kantum Chitamatir Brahman Dvarakam Rattamastita Upale Bitravante Uttaran Bhairavi Varna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Prabhu. So, just going to get the verse up here myself. Sorry, I'm in a few technical issues. Did have it up here. Okay. So the verse we're reading here is describing how we're in the process of as soon as he translation, sorry, as soon as he seated himself on the chariot to start for Dwarka, he saw Uttara hurrying toward him in fear. Small purport. All members of the Pandavas were completely dependent on the protection of the Lord, and therefore the Lord protected all of them in all circumstances. The Lord protects everyone, but one who depends completely upon him is especially looked after by the Lord. The father is more attentive to the little son who is exclusively dependent on the father. Shashrin, would you like to recite the Mangala Charan? You still there?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Om Ya Jnana Jana Shalakaya
Shri Chaitanya Krishna.
Tadanti Swapadantikam Vandeyam Shri Guru Shri Yudapatakamanam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Radha Shri Rupam Sakrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam
Advaita Parijana Samatam Krishna Chaitanya Radha.
Bando Jagatpate
Upika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye
Mami Hari Priye
Vancha
Vajadam
Kalpataruvascha
Kirpa
Kripa
Sindhu
Sindhu Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnave
Yo Namo
Namo Namaha
Jai
Jai
Shri
Shri Krishna Chaitanya
Prabhu
Prabhu
Nityananda
Nityananda Shri
Shri
Advaita Gadadara Shiva Sadi
Sadi
Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Thank you so much, Shashwin Prabhu. Apologies, everyone, for the sound cutting off. Hope you can hear me okay. And thank you, everyone, so much for being with us here today on Zoom to discuss this wonderful section of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Just going to reread the verse. Gantam Kritamatir Brahman Davakam Ratamastitaha Upapalebhya Vida Vantim Uttarambaya Vidvalam. As soon as he seated himself on the chariot to start for Dwarka, he saw Uttara running toward him in fear. So, with your blessings, I'll try and facilitate some discussion on this beautiful verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, first of all, to give some context, what's happening here? So, what's happening here is that amazing devotee Uttara is running towards the Lord and praying for protection, and actually she's such an amazing and kind-hearted soul that she's actually saying she doesn't mind if she is killed, but just protects her precious child which she's carrying. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada, he refers to he actually refers to the Pandavas. All the members of the family of the Pandavas were completely dependent on the protection of the Lord, and therefore the Lord protected them in all circumstances. So, in one sense, he's saying the Lord protects everyone, but one who depends completely upon him is especially looked after. And he gives the analogy of the father is more attentive to the little son who is exclusively dependent on the father. So as I was thinking about this purport, and we all, although we may not have a Brahmastra chasing after us, we do sometimes, it can feel like we've got a Brahmastra chasing after us, in the sense that we can face times of difficulty and extreme pressure. It may be we're facing extreme difficulties in our workplace, a lot of pressure there. We may have some difficulties we may be facing financial difficulties. We may be facing difficulties with our families, or it could be even some difficulties in health. But one thing's for sure, we're going to face difficulties. We're going to be times where we've got that metaphorical Brahmastra right on our tails, and we're feeling really stressed and under pressure and needing some help. So in these, bearing this in mind, I wanted to talk about or facilitate a discussion on this process of Sharanagati or surrender. So in Sanatana Goswami actually talks about this principle of Sharanagati in the Hari Bhakti Vilas. So there's actually 6 principles of surrender to the Lord. In this verse 11.676 in the Hari Bhakti Vilas, Sanatana Goswami says, Anukulasya sankalpaha Pratikulyasya Varjanam Rashishyati Vishvaso Gopitridve Varanam Tata Adamakshepa Karpanya Shavida Sharanagritaha. So the 6 processes of surrender is one, accepting what is favorable for, we've discussed before, unalloyed bhakti. So this accepting only what's favorable for that. So then pratikulyasya varjanam, rejecting everything unfavorable for unalloyed bhakti. Rashishyati vishvaso, having faith that only Bhagavan is one's protector. Gopitrit varanam, accepting Bhagavan as one's only maintainer. Then atmanikshepa, complete submission of oneself to Bhagavan. Gabanya, feeling meek, humble, insignificant, wretched, materially destitute. So we're going to focus today on having faith that only Bhagavan is one's protector and accepting Bhagavan as one's only maintainer. And how can we do this? So I wanted to discuss just 2 things really, is what are our obstacles, what are our blocks to surrendering to Krishna all the time, whether it's difficulty or whether not in times of difficulty. And a few examples of this surrender. And then, okay, so we're told surrender to Krishna, Sharanagati, but then does that mean we shouldn't act? Or do we know probably we should act? We still meant to act. The Christian saying, God helps those who help themselves. So when do we defend and when do we depend? So how does this work? So these 2 things really just are, what are obstacles to surrender, and when do we defend and when do we depend? So in first point is on the regarding the obstacles of surrender. In the Bhagavad Gita, in the 2nd chapter, Krishna says, Dhyato vishayam pumsha sangasteshu pajayate sangat sanjana kamaha kamat krodo vijayate. So a very sweet, beautiful verse. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops. And from lust, anger arises. So within this verse is a really key to how we can see that this is going to be a block to us for surrendering to Krishna, is contemplating the objects of the senses. A lovely example of this later in the Bhagavatam is that of Vishwamitra Muni. So Vishwamitra Muni, he was an amazing sage, extremely powerful. So I myself, I like to do the practice of taking a cold shower, but it's difficult, especially in winter months. In the morning, I like to take a cold shower because I feel like it's good for my mind. And in fact, I remember once in the, I was in the ashram and the boiler had broken. And at that time, it was January. I just got back from India, so it's January, and it was especially cold that winter. So it got up to like -7. And then, so the boiler had broken and we had to take showers, but it wasn't just a cold shower. It was like freezing cold. So we'd turn on the shower and I'd take a deep breath and then I would jump in and it was horribly cold. Like it was really almost painful experience. And I'd be able to stay in there maybe only for like a couple of minutes, try and clean myself and then jump out. So, but here to give the example of how powerful Vishwamitra was, is he would stay in the Himalayas and he would meditate, he would cover himself in ice up to his neck. So his whole body in ice up in the Himalayas. And he would stay like that in meditation for many months at a time. So this, we can see how powerful he must have been, that we can struggle to stay in cold conditions for, a few seconds, few minutes. But this is the power of Vishwamitra Muni, that he was able to stay in a state of meditation for such a long time. However, after meditating for a very, very long time, he didn't even see a woman, but there was a maiden, Menika, and he just heard her ankle bracelets, the bells on her ankle bracelets. He just heard that. And just by that, he thought, oh, is there a woman here? And just because of that sound and contemplating the objects of the senses, in this case, a woman, his meditation was broken. So I think this is an important point in the sense that often, we can desire for certain things, maybe may or may not be the opposite sex, but it can definitely be materialistic things. We everywhere that we go, we may not be engaging with watching television programs and movies and things like that, but we're constantly bombarded with advertisements, objects of the senses. If you go out into the town, you'll see advertisements there. If you're driving your car, you see advertisements on the trucks. And even if you're trying to watch just like ISKCON lectures on YouTube, before the lecture comes on, you'll get an advertisement come up on YouTube unless you pay for YouTube Premium or something like that. So we're constantly bombarded with things which want to incite this lust within us. So we have to be very, very careful to guard our minds against these. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. But one practical thing we can learn from the pastime of Vishwamitra Muni is that one thing is he although he was very powerful himself, ultimately he fell down because he was relying on himself. So he was very powerful, but he wasn't relying on the Lord. He was relying on his own powers solely. But then in comparison, we look at the pastime of Haridas Thakur. So Haridas Thakur, known as Namacharya, a great associate of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And I believe, someone please correct me if I'm wrong, I believe he would chant in the region of 192 rounds a day. So, and he would chant a third of his rounds in the mind, a third of his rounds he would chant kind of softly under his breath, and a third of his rounds he would chant at the top of his lungs, so that all living entities could benefit from hearing the holy names. So he had great taste. He was very dependent on the Lord, and he got a reputation as being such a great saint, and he was very revered in the area. But at that time, the area was in the rule of under Muslim rule, so under the rule of the Mughals, and the local ruler of that area became very, very angry that Haridas Thakur was being so respected. And so he said, I know, I'll show this saint. We'll find out what a real saint he is. And he got the most famous prostitute, most desired, beautiful prostitute in the area to go and seduce Haridas Thakur. So the prostitute approached the residence of Haridas Thakur in order to seduce him, and then he would fall down from his position and he'd be ridiculed and disgraced. And she asked Haridas Thakur, will you be with me tonight? And Haridas Thakur said, yes, surely I will satisfy your desires, but please just let me finish my chanting. So the prostitute waited there for Haridas Thakur to finish his chanting. But the thing is, Haridas Thakur, such taste, Namacharya, for the holy name, he did not stop chanting. So he just chanted throughout the whole night, at which point the prostitute left. She came back again the next day to fulfill the mission assigned to her by the Qazi of the area. And again, Haridas Thakur said, surely I will fulfill your desire, but just let me finish my chanting. And the same thing happened once again. So again, she left, and finally she approached for the third night with the same request. And again, Haridas Thakur did the same thing, agreeing to fulfill her desire, but just chanted the whole night through. At which point, the prostitute prostrated herself in front of him and apologized sincerely. He said, my dear sage, my dear saint, I was sent here to seduce you. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. And Haridas Thakur, he said, I knew why you were here. I knew what you came here for. And the prostitute said to him, now what shall I do? And he said, shave your head, take the holy names of the Lord, and stay in this place and take the holy names of the Lord. And so she did this. And actually, later on, this prostitute went from being a prostitute to actually revered in the area and well respected by all as being such a saintly woman, as she shaved her head and took to the holy names of the Lord. And in fact, there's a lovely painting which I really like. It's one of my favorite pictures. It's actually of this pastime where the prostitute is sat there, now no longer a prostitute, now a sadhu, and she sat there chanting in her white robes. And initially, when I saw that picture, I thought it was Haridas Thakur, but then you can see Haridas Thakur waving to her in the background as he leaves that residence and leaves it to her. And she becomes well respected in that area and receives many donations as being such a saintly character by people in the village. So the two differences here is that Haridas Thakur relied on his connection with the Lord, whereas Vishwamitra Muni relied on his own power. This brings us to another point, which is an obstacle to surrender, which is that another obstacle to surrender is we could be too attached to our power and our power achieving a certain result. And when we don't get that result, we become frustrated, we become angry. So it may be that we're in a workplace and the project didn't go our way. It may be that within our families, we want our family to behave a certain way, but despite all our efforts, they don't change. It may be that we're studying for some exam and we're putting our efforts and we don't get the result that we wanted. And this can cause a real block to surrendering. A few years ago, one of the services that kindly the devotees engaged me in is being in place for Janmashtami at the Bhaktivedanta Mana. And so one year I was on a play and it was actually a play on the Bhagavatam. And so we'd got in the plays that we have some props so like a screen at the back. We have several mics and many people come to see these plays. And when we were first doing the play, everything was going wrong. So the mics were not working. People were shouting at the back saying, we can't hear you, like this. Two of the actors, they hadn't learned their lines. So they just took their phones on the stage and were reading in the middle of a huge crowd. They were just reading from their phones and not even kind of, acting. And then at one point, even after a few shows, the screen at the back fell down in the middle of the play. And so just so many things were going wrong. People were forgetting their lines. Sound wasn't working. The background wasn't working. And many of us doing the play, whether it was the people doing the technical work or the actors themselves, we became very frustrated. And we actually wanted to give up. So we were supposed to do about 10 shows a day on each of the 2 days we celebrate Janmashtami. And after about 4 shows, we were all feeling very embarrassed because we thought this should be a lot better quality. A few Maharajas came. Swayam Bhagavan Keshav Maharaj came to a show and it was awful. And we just felt we were all feeling very embarrassed. And we wanted to we were actually discussing, should we just stop now? And then we had a bit of a break in between shows. And I thought, let me just go and chant and meditate on the Lord and what is Krishna trying to tell me here. And then I remembered my famous verse that I like to quote all the time. 2.47 from the Bhagavad Gita. Karmanya vadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana makarma phalehetu burmate sangostav karmani. You have a right to perform your duty, but you're not entitled to the fruits of your actions. Never consider yourself the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. So I actually remembered this verse and I thought, yeah, what am I doing? Like I'm just doing my best. We're all doing our best here to do a service for Janmashtami for the Lord and preach the glories of the Bhagavatam. And as long as we've done our best, the results is up to Krishna. Whether it's a failure or whether it's a success, that's not up to us. So I made this decision to say no. I said, I'm just going to do my best. I've learned all my lines. I'll act to the best of my ability. I'll try to help the stage crew where we can and fix things. And then it's up to Krishna whether it's a success or not. And I kid you not, the two actors who didn't know their lines, they left. So we modified the play a little bit. I took on some of their lines. The sound suddenly started working perfectly. And suddenly we started to gel with each other as actors, and everything went smoothly. The prop stage, everything just went really, really well. The stage screen managed to stay intact and not fall down. And that next showing was just like very well received by the audience. And we got like a standing ovation and things like that. And people were congratulating us afterwards. And I just thought, Krishna, he's just having a laugh with me, he's teaching me, that, and this is what is an obstacle to that surrender, is like, we often want our life, whatever situation we're in, to work out in a certain way, and we're very attached to that. And I know I'm just speaking not from some deep realization, but if we can try to remember and that the result is not within our control, and just to act in the proper way in accordance to the scripture, in accordance to guidance from our guru. So we use the term guru, sadhu, shastra. So we follow our guru, we follow the devotees, advice of devotees, and we follow the shastra. And as long as we're in line with that, well, regardless of what the result may be, we can be more accepting of that. Because the problem is, if we don't accept it, when things do go away, we're like, Haribol, Krishna, you're the best. Thank you so much, Krishna. But when things don't go our way, we may turn away from Krishna. We may actually lose faith, even though actually it was never within our control. So this is one thing to really meditate on. And I've got a little acronym for you. There's times when our mind is weak. Our mind is weak, and we're a tendency to then make mistakes and look away from the Lord and do things which aren't in line with Guru Sadhu Shastra. So in these times, I want you to remember to halt, HALT. So don't trust ourselves. Don't make an important decision on something to do when you're hungry, when you're angry, when you're lonely, or when you're tired. Because at these moments, our mind can be very weak, and we can do things that we may regret later. I'm not, sense control is something that I'm working on. I used to have a very voracious appetite. I'm trying to be a bit more regulated with my eating. But I know for a fact that if I'm really, really hungry, like I've been fasting, and then I have to do some shopping, and I go to the groceries, I know that I will buy excessive things if I'm very hungry. I think better I make sure I've broken my fast, I've eaten something, and then I do that. Otherwise, I'll buy unnecessary things, unnecessary foodstuffs, because I'm hungry. I'm sure we can all agree that we faced circumstances where we felt angry, and then we've acted out in angry. We've acted out of anger and regretted it later. Sometimes we can feel lonely, and that can cause us to do things which will take us away from the Lord. We can feel lonely, and we may want to we may forget Krishna in those moments. And in that moment, it's important to connect with people. And finally, when we're tired, the mind is very weak when we're tired physically. So Bhaktivinoda Bhaktivinoda Thakur always sells health sadhana service. So it's actually a service to Krishna to look after our bodies, to make sure we're well rested, to ensure that our diet is good, and that we're looking after our bodies also, because we can use this body, although we may not be the body, we understand that on a philosophical level, even if we haven't deeply realized it, but we can use this body in the service of Krishna. In fact, that's why we wear tilak on the 12 points of the body to mark this as a temple. So that's a few points on some obstacles to surrender. But then how sometimes we can think, okay, so when do I act? When do I not act? When should I defend and when should I depend? We can look at the example of Arjun. So Arjun, in the very beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, he says, Karpanya dosapata svabhava pachami tam dharma samuda chetaha yastraya shan nishitam bruhitan me shishyaste ham shadimam tvam parpanam. So Arjun at this point, he's in distress, and he's saying to Krishna, now I'm confused about my duty and what I should do. So he surrenders unto Krishna at this moment, who in that moment is acting as his guru. And he actually, in the very beginning today, we talked about the principles of 6 aspects of surrender. And one of these, which Arjun displays, is to be very, very meek in front of one, very meek and mild. And he's doing that in front of Krishna. He's being very lowly. And then later in the Gita, he develops a conviction to fight. So he goes out, he fights vigorously, and we read the Mahabharata, and he's victorious in the battle. So he acts, he fights. But then later, if you read the Mahabharata, we hear the wonderful pastime of the grandson of Lord Bhimsen, Barbarik. So Barbarik is a very, very powerful warrior. In fact, it's said that the only person as powerful as Barbarik on the battlefield was Bhishma Dev. So he is supremely powerful. And at the beginning, before the battle, he approaches the Pandavas, he approaches Krishna, and Barbarik, the grandson of Lord Bhim, says that he would like to fight on the side of the Pandavas. So he's asked to demonstrate his prowess, his power. Then Krishna says to him, see that tree over there? I want you to fire your arrow and get every single leaf on the tree. And so Barbarik, he fires his arrow, and such is his power that the arrow captures every single leaf on the tree, bar one, which Krishna has quickly grabbed and put under his foot. At which point, Krishna holding the leaf under his foot, the arrow is spinning around Krishna's foot. Krishna lifts his foot and it goes through the leaf. So everyone cheers and is amazed at the power of Barbarik. He's such a powerful warrior. But then Krishna does something very interesting. He pulls out his sword and he cuts Barbarik's head off. At which point everyone is shocked. But Krishna explains that Barbarik is a mercenary. And also Barbarik was such his mood that he will always fight for the weaker side. So at that point, the Pandavas were the weaker side because they were vastly outnumbered by the Kauravas. But what he would do is he would fight the Kauravas, kill many of them until they were the lesser side. And then he would join their side and start killing Pandavas. And like this, he would flip until he would destroy everyone. So this is why Krishna seemingly killed him. But actually, they could see that Barbarik, although he was headless, his head was there and he was still alive, floating. And Krishna said to him, he said, look, I will give you one benediction because I've done this to you. Please name it and I can bestow upon you a benediction. So Barbarik, being a great Kshatriya, Kshatriyas, they like to fight and they like to watch fighting. So he bestowed upon him the divine vision. He wished to see the battlefield in its fullest. Because like it says, Kshatriyas, they like to fight and watch fighting. So Krishna bestowed upon him the divine vision to see the battlefield of Kurukshetra in its fullest. So the battlefield was concluded and the Pandavas, they were successful. And Arjun and Lord Bhima walking off the battlefield, and they're debating. Arjun is saying, I surely killed most of the warriors on the battlefield with my bow, with Krishna riding my chariot. I surely killed many more warriors than you. Bhima is like, no, with my bow and arrow, with my great mace, I've surely killed more warriors than you. At which point in the distance, they hear something. Ho, 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 a laughing in the distance. And they're obviously very, very powerful warriors. They think, who dares laugh at us? And they look up on the hilltop, and who do they see? The head of Barbaric. And he's laughing at them. And they say, why are you laughing? And he says, I know who killed most of the warriors on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. And they said, who was it who killed, killed the most men? And Barbaric explains, it was Krishna. And so they're both confused and say, but Krishna didn't fight on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. But actually, Barbaric, given the divine vision, had seen that Krishna had actually expanded himself. And it was Krishna who had killed everyone on the battlefield. So like this, the reason I'm telling you this is, and this wonderful pastime is that Arjun acted on the orders of Krishna. He just did his duty. But then it was actually Krishna who did all the work, really. And Krishna explains this in the Bhagavad Gita, that Arjun just acts. All these men, they've already been killed by me. You just do your duty. So in this way, this is an example of someone who acted as a surrender to Krishna. But then later in the Bhagavatam, we also look at the example of an amazing devotee of the Lord, Ambrish Maharaj. So Ambrish Maharaj, an amazing devotee of the Lord, was once visited by a great sage, Durvasa Muni. And Durvasa Muni, he wished to stay at the abode of Ambrish Maharaj. So he, obviously being a great sage, he welcomed him. He offered him all due respects. And then Durvasa Muni, he left that place at one point to enter his trance, to enter a samadhi. At which point it was the day after Ekadashi, and Ambrish Maharaj, he was waiting to break his fast as per tradition, and Durvasa Muni had not returned yet. And as is kind of customary, is that one should not serve themselves before a guest, especially a great sage like Durvasa Muni. But Ambrish Maharaj was also, because he needed to break his fast, he just took a little water. And but then Durvasa Muni, through his grace power, could notice this, and he took great offense at Ambrish Maharaj. And such that he was so offended that by his great great power, he conjured a demon to go and punish Ambrish Maharaj. But Ambrish Maharaj didn't act. He was such a surrendered soul to the Lord that in that moment he chose to surrender and was actually protected by the Lord. The Lord sent his Sudarshan chakra to behead the demon. And actually the chakra actually chased after Durvasa Muni also. And it's explained, Prabhupada explains that once someone has offended a devotee, even the Lord can't protect them unless they're forgiven by that devotee himself. Ambrish Maharaj, being a great, great devotee of the Lord's, as we discussed last week, one of the divine qualities of a real devotee of the Lord, a pure devotee, is that they're forgiving. So it's forgiven in this way. But in this instance, Ambrish Maharaj, he didn't react. He didn't actually act. Then we also look at the example of Prahlad Maharaj. So Prahlad Maharaj, he was tortured by his father Hiranyakashipu. He was thrown into a pit of snakes. He was thrown off a cliff. He was poisoned. Tried to and he was put in the presence of a huge elephant to be stamped on. But in all those moments, he didn't act. He just surrendered unto the Lord. He even offered the poison to that he was being fed, and the Lord actually purified the poison, so he was able to take it. He was protected in all these instances where he was tortured, and ultimately the Lord came as Lord Nrsingadev to kill his demoniac father. And then finally, we look at the example of, we've already talked about Haridas Thakur. Well, Haridas Thakur was also beaten in, I believe, 12 different villages at the orders of the local government. So in one sense, Arjun, he acted, but with a mindset of depending on that Krishna is the doer. But then Ambrish Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, and Haridas Thakur, they didn't act. Why? And then when should we act? When should we not act? And what's the difference between these different devotees who acted, didn't act? So I just wanted to explore this a little bit before we conclude. So we look at the example of Arjun. So if he hadn't acted in that moment, he wouldn't have been following his duty as a Kshatriya. His duty was to fight and to protect. And also, he wouldn't have been following the orders of his guru, which in that moment was Krishna. Then we look at Ambrish Maharaj. Why didn't he act? Or why did he just solely surrender? So Ambrish Maharaj was a pure devotee of the Lord, and he was very cultured and followed the etiquette, the tradition of the. So in such state, he was following. Actually, we understand in Krishna consciousness that the culture, the etiquette, the Brahminical culture of Krishna consciousness is very much intertwined with the philosophy. And so he was following the philosophy, he was following the culture here, the etiquette, in terms of offering all due respects to the sage, the Brahmin. And this is why he didn't act. Then we look at Prahlad Maharaj and Haridas Thakur. And why didn't they act? Why did they just solely depend on the Lord without acting? Well, we look at that situation. First, Prahlad Maharaj, he was only a 5-year-old boy. He was powerless. So in that instance, he couldn't do anything apart from depend on the Lord. Same with Haridas Thakur. He could not fight off the government officials. He was powerless in that moment, and nothing he could do apart from surrender to the Lord. So in this instance, so how does that apply to us? Well, we all face different circumstances in life, difficult circumstances. That's a given. And sometimes we may not know what to do. Should we just sit and pray to the Lord and not act? Or should we try and do something and control the situation in some way? And so what I can say to that is we follow Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. So we follow the advice of our guru or gurus. We take shelter of a sadhu, a devotee, and we look if our actions are in line with the Srimad Bhagavatam, with the Chaitanya Charitamrita, with the Bhagavad Gita. We look if our actions are in line with the teachings of Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas. And if they're not, then we don't act in such a way. To give some examples, sometimes, for example, I've been in a job for a while where I thought that it would be better that I live quite far from the office, and I thought that it would be better to have a role, since I work in IT, which is 100% remote, and that will be a lot more beneficial for my sadhana and my regulation, because I won't have to drive very far. I'll save about 2 to even 3 hours a day in traveling. And also driving tends to drain me a lot. So I'll have a lot more energy to focus on my Krishna consciousness and maintaining the house and like that. And so I've been meaning to change job, but the problem is if I just pray for a new job, it's not going to just fall on my lap. I have to put myself in a position. So I acted and I started applying for positions, and it took some time to find the right job because I didn't want to have a job which was too stressful and pressure, because then I wouldn't be able to dedicate so much time to and energy to Krishna consciousness. But yeah, so and actually, if I'm honest, I was like, Krishna, I've been applying, but I still haven't found the right job. Some I turned down, sometimes they rejected me, but I haven't found the right one. Krishna, help me out here. But I just kept doing it, applying. And now, thankfully, last week I received an offer for a new role, which will be 100% remote. And also it's not too much pressure. It's just, good support system, good level, nice manager, good team. And I think it'll be a good choice for my Krishna consciousness. So in this way, I acted. But in another situation, I have a family member who's very, very sick, very, very sick. And in some ways, there's nothing we can do in one sense. Like they're under the care of doctors, and they're at the hospital, and we can advise them. We're trying to look at alternative methods of treatment, Ayurveda, etc. But not sure if they're able to follow that kind of thing. And so in one sense, we're powerless. So sometimes we are powerless in situations to control anything, to act even. We have no method of action. And in those moments, all we can do is surrender, keep our prayers to the Lord, keep our faith to the Lord. And I always remember, you're all very familiar with His Grace Kanchanabja Prabhu. And something he always told me is Krishna likes it when we take shelter of devotees. So in terms of how we surrender, is devotees are Krishna's representative, and Krishna speaks through his devotees. So until we're at a very, very advanced stage, sometimes we may not see how Krishna is communicating with us directly, but he's speaking through his devotees. So, and another point related to this is sometimes we take advice from people outside of devotional circles, but because they're not following and practicing the principles of Krishna consciousness, they may lead us astray in one sense, because devotees have our ultimate interest in best at heart. They have our best interest at heart, which is they're thinking, how can I bring this person closer to Krishna? Whereas often outside, we may take advice and they're thinking, how can I just improve this person's material situation? But in a way which is not necessarily in alignment with the principles of Krishna consciousness. Very early on in my Krishna consciousness, I've had many friends who are outside Krishna consciousness, and I was going through a rough time, and one of my friends said, "Oh, well, you're getting up very early, and you're chanting 16 rounds. Why don't you just stop chanting for a while, and that kind of thing." And obviously, he's thinking from he's not seeing the value and so much nourishment that I get from chanting the holy names of the Lord, and he's thinking purely from a materialistic mindset. But I always remember that and think, okay, so it's so important that we can associate it with, we may have family members who are not in Krishna consciousness, we may have work colleagues, we may have old friends. That's okay. We don't need to completely cut them off. My limited understanding is we give up the association of non-devotees, means we don't reveal our heart to these people, and we don't engage in a close interaction. We don't reveal our mind to these people because they're not thinking in alignment with the principles of Krishna consciousness. So this is how we can perhaps surrender. So yes, we talked about Sharanagati, the 6 principles of surrender, and in particular, so just to go over these: accepting only what is favorable for unalloyed bhakti, rejecting what is unfavorable, having faith that only Bhagavan is one's protector, accepting Bhagavan is one's only maintainer, and complete submission of oneself to Bhagavan, just like Arjun did. We looked at some obstacles to surrender and the beautiful verse on the Bhagavad Gita, and how the objects of the senses can lead us astray, make us fall into anger. Attachment to outcome. We can be attached to having our life work out in a certain way, a certain result. And this can block us from surrendering to the Lord, and maybe even take us away from the Lord when things don't go our way, if we're too attached to having a certain material situation. And then we talked about when to defend and when to depend. And we looked at the examples of Arjun, who fought. And then we looked at the examples of Ambrish Maharaj, who didn't. And even Prahlad Maharaj, who didn't. And Haridas Thakur, who didn't also. And how to kind of weigh these up, when to defend and when to depend. So, and ultimately be dependent. The way we can take shelter and keep on surrendering is whenever we act, refer to Guru Sadhu Shastra, and just take shelter of Krishna's devotees. Reveal our mind in confidence to devotees we trust, devotees we respect, senior devotees, and they will guide us. And Krishna will also appreciate that we're taking shelter of devotees as well. So these are a few thoughts on this beautiful verse on the pastime of Uttara, as she's surrendering to the Lord. Thank you so much for your kind attention, and I'd welcome at this point any comments, any corrections, or any questions. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for such a wonderful class. Are there any questions or comments? I think devotees are just taking in what you've said, Prabhuji. Maybe I can start with a question. Prabhuji, Vishwamitra was, when he was meditating, he must be meditating on the Lord. Yeah, but and I guess he must be using Sadhu Shastra. I mean, he must have the intellect. Why was he doing it? Why was he sitting there and getting frozen? So I didn't understand that he was just depending on himself and not on the Lord, because what he was doing it was for the Lord.
Yeah, good question. Very good question. So Vishwamitra Muni was a great sage, and he was so Kritika Maji's asked a wonderful question, is that how did he fall down then if he was such a great sage, and he must have been meditating on the Lord as such, and these great munis, they meditate on the Lord in the heart, and they enter a state of samadhi, etc., etc. So my limited understanding is that actually, although he was a great sage, he was, I think the idea is that, in Krishna consciousness, we have to understand that even if we're trying to connect with Krishna, it's ultimately only through, not through, our endeavor puts us in a position to receive the mercy of the Lord, but it's not our endeavor that connects us with the Lord. It's not our power that makes us advance in Krishna consciousness. It's the mercy of the Lord and his devotees and Guru. So the mindset of Vishwamitra was his own advancement was dependent on his power. That's my limited understanding. And because of this, he wasn't so fixed and fell down due to the allurement of Menika and hearing ankle bracelets. I don't know if this makes sense, Manji. It's kind of like, I think that only by my chanting and, my endeavor in doing really good chanting, having really good sadhana, and just by doing that, that's going to, and not having the mindset that, okay, I'm going to do my best, like I said, but ultimately my Krishna consciousness is dependent on the mercy of Krishna, and it is not dependent on me. It is dependent on the mercy of Guru and Krishna, and not dependent on me and my prowess. So does that make sense? There's like a difference there. One could be practicing Krishna consciousness in a mindset that it's dependent on me, but instead it's like, no, it's I need to endeavor, do my best, but ultimately I'm dependent on the mercy of Krishna. So it's subtle. It's more like an internal thing rather than external. Two people might be doing the same thing, endeavoring equally as hard, but one has a mindset of that they're dependent on themselves. I can see Partha Prabhuji is on the call. So Prabhuji, if you have any comments on this beautiful pastime, I would love to hear also.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji. No, you are absolutely right, but I'm just adding some point. I am audible, Prabhu, because there's some network problem here.
Yes, Prabhuji, we can hear you very well.
Yeah, it's a nice question, like difference between Vishwamitra Rishi and Haridas Thakur. You are telling Vishwamitra Rishi such a great sage, how he fell down. Because the thing is that in Krishna consciousness, that is the preliminary stage. Already we discussed many classes. In a Krishna consciousness, we are taught we are not supposed to control our senses. We are supposed to engage our senses in Krishna service. Because senses are so powerful, we cannot control. Same thing has happened in like a Durvasa Muni or Vishwamitra Rishi. They are not controlled. They try to control their senses, but senses are so powerful. But Krishna consciousness devotee, they are so easy to overcome these challenges because they are surrendered to Krishna, engage their senses to the Krishna service. So there is no question of a fall down. Like already example you given Haridas Thakur, how he prostitute came and how he overcome these challenges. But as a Durvasa Muni, he tried to capture everything by his yogic power. So he fell down. Also another thing, these yogis, the munis, they are not meditating Krishna. When they are Krishna, then they will be supreme, go to the back to Godhead, they have no fall down. They are in different views like Paramatma, impersonal soul, like so many things. That is also another thing. So these two things, two aspects, they are not focusing on Krishna, means servicing, and also they are trying to control by force, by yogic power, the senses. But whatever devotee is a fully surrender, like a Prabhupada giving comment, he is like an infant, is a baby. He is fully dependent upon his father. So they are fully dependent on Krishna, the devotees, and engage their senses in Krishna service. So that very easily overcome these challenges. Hare Krishna.
Wonderfully explained, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. Yes,
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna.
So yes, Prabhuji explained that we engage as devotees or aspiring devotees, we engage the senses, whereas the yogis are trying to control the senses just themselves. We recognize it's impossible to do that. But if we engage the senses in the service of Krishna, the sight, we look at the deities, the sounds we hear, we listen to the holy names of the Lord, the tongue, we talk about Krishna, and we only talk about things in relation to Krishna consciousness as much as possible. We eat prasadam like this. Instead, we're not really trying to control it just by our own willpower, because we will fall. Instead, we do this. And Shiva and Mohini, the pastime of Shiva and Mohini, was this similar? How that Lord Shiva, yes, so yes, indeed. So we know Lord Shiva, he's a great personality. He's the often referred to as the greatest Vaishnava in one sense, but in this instance he fell down. But obviously he was Mohini was a bit different as well. You know, it was the incarnation of the Lord as well. But yeah, it's so that this pastime is also given that even Shiva can fall down if he's not and get such a great personality, whether it's these great money to a supremely powerful, or Lord Shiva, he's, you know, apart from Krishna, he's more powerful than Lord Shiva. Even he, you know, can fall down if he's not engaged in the service of into the service of the Lord, not connected to the Lord, and instead is meditating on him, either on the impersonal feature. And this is why actually it's so important that I really love the point that Partha Prabhuji made about these munis. Sometimes they're meditating on the impersonal feature of the Lord, Brahman, and sometimes they want to emerge into the Brahman, or even Paramatma. But we, the devotees, they want to connect with the personal aspect of the Lord. So we're a personalist movement. We don't want to just become the Lord. Krishna says, rather than, a lot of these people, they want to become the Lord. But even then, better than becoming the Lord is you become, Prabhupada says, become a commander of Krishna. And the way you become a commander of Krishna, it's ironic, is by becoming his servant, Krishna actually becomes the servant of the devotee. Just like a name of Krishna is Parthasarathi, the charioteer of Partha, of Arjun. So such a great, you become a devotee of Krishna, and he actually becomes your servant. So that's the position of a devotee, my limited understanding.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji, Path Prabhu and Kamal Panchal Prabhuji. Are there any other questions or comments?
Hare Krishna Mataji, I just wanted to thank you, Prabhuji, for an excellent class. I just wanted to make a comment that, when you said like connecting with Krishna is so important to control our senses. And especially, I think if you chant 16 rounds first thing in the morning, it really grounds your senses and you can control them a lot better. In the day, my rounds are split up during the day. I can feel the difference. So I think surrendering to Krishna is so important in our life. So that's the comment I wanted to make. Thank you.
Thanks. A really nice point by my mother. Thank you so much for joining the call today. And yeah, I agree. I think it's His Holiness Chandramauli Swami who once said that if you chant your rounds in the morning, then you'll run the day. And if you don't, then the day will run you. So, and we're constantly so important. And this is a foundation of the movement. I remember actually on one occasion, I was listening to my Guru Maharaj, and you probably know that early in the movement, a lot of the people who joined Krishna consciousness, they were addicted to drugs. And my Guru Maharaj was saying there was this one devotee, and he was coming off addiction to drugs, and he was such he was so I've forgotten the terminology that he used, but when someone is coming off the addiction to drugs, they kind of space out, and he was taking so long to chant 16 rounds. He was chanting like this, like Hare Krishna, like he was really spaced out, and he was chanting so slowly that he was just taking all day to chant 16 rounds. And devotees were complaining, say, look, he's not doing anything, he just sat there chanting. And Prabhupada said, no, let him chant. So this is like a really like a practical thing where it's just like, yes, and again, in line with what Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, it's like health, sadhana, service. So like the foundation of our movement, yes, we engage in service. That's important, that is. But also we need to really focus on our sadhana. And this good sadhana is what my limited understanding is. When we have good sadhana, that will also purify our service as well. So yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that lovely point.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. I think we've exhausted our time. We'll leave the questions for next time. Can I request Path Prabhu to kindly end the session?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Yes. Prabhuji, I'm just giving one point according to your surrendership. The whole class is based on that. Also, many devotees, they are the great sages also giving on a commentary according to the difference between Draupadi and Uttara. Sometimes, Draupadi, when Uttara have the problems, she came direct and surrendered to the Krishna. In the next, we can go the text number 9, Pahi Pahi Mahajogin Deva Deva Jagatpate, like that one. So he's not going anywhere. He completely surrendered to the Krishna at once. He have no doubt. But when we go for the Draupadi, although Draupadi is a Krishna, his name is Krishna, is not different from Krishna. And she was not an ordinary woman, she manufactured by the sacrifice. But she has so many doubts when she was in a problem in the Kurushabha, in the dynasty, Kuru dynasty. She was insulted. She is fast trying her himself to control her prestige. Then she go to her husbands, then go to the Kurushabha like a Pitama Bhishma and Dronacharya. She have many. He tried to more. He had no complete faith to Krishna. And when at last he think, oh, I didn't save myself, then he surrendered to the Krishna. Then Krishna give this, supply the saris and save her in this danger. But in Uttara, in one step, he just not go to anywhere. He just come and took shelter of the Krishna. So that many Acharya giving the comment, we supposed to follow. If you are become a great devotee, you supposed to follow the footprint of Uttara. There is no doubt in that. Not going here and there. Straightforward, come and surrender. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you so much.
This is my little understanding and just giving the comment according to the Acharyas, what we learn. So thank you very much, Prabhuji, for your nice and wonderful class. And really, it is very important to surrender. It is not an easy thing, but it is you supposed to try surrender. So I request all the devotees who joined here, please unmute yourself and chant Hare Krishna mantra for glorification of His grace, Kamal Panchal Prabhuji. Please join.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Kalpatarubhascha, Kripa Sindhu Vacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
His grace Kamal Panchal Prabhu ji ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you for the wonderful class, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you. Thank you, Kirtika Mataji, for
Thank you,
organizing.
Mataji, for joining in. Mataji joins every day, so thank you so much. Hare Krishna.